My viewers, have you ever heard of postmodernism? This is one of the schools of thought that has really been ignored in literary studies, especially in African literature. Now, today I want us um, to think about or to look at one of my books. The books I published in 2024, and it was about postmodern reading of contemporary East African fiction in February 2024. And it's one of the books in which I I explored, some of the merits of postmodernism on the East African literary scene. Although most of the schools arose in Europe, but one thing about philosophical frameworks, or what we call theory. Theory is both interdisciplinary and universal. So most philosophers theorize about issues that happen everywhere in the world. And you cannot just limit a theory to Europe, because Nietzsche or Heidegger talked about it. So after careful analysis of what these theories talked about, I came up with this book in 2024, and I want to acknowledge Jennifer Abbott, um, the commissioning editor, Routledge, for reading my proposal and considering worth what they sold. I also want to acknowledge and thank Anita Butt, who is um, was one of also assistant editor from Routledge, for guiding me through the process um, up to the end and production of this particular book. And I want to encourage you viewers to subscribe to my channel. And for scholars, whether upcoming scholars or established scholars, please buy Postmodern reading, of East African prose fiction, so that we promote local authors. We need to promote local authors. We should not wait for people from the West to buy our books. Let us buy and promote local authors, so that we promote them and advance, these productions. So we now move on. Let's now move on to so this is the book. Yeah, this is the book cover. If you just Google my name or you Google the title, you will see this cover. So this is the book I produced in 2024, and it focuses on analysis of East African prose fiction. We have great writers like Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Nurudin Farah. We also have Gael Faye from Rwanda, um, and many other great writers from East Africa. So so the focus is on postmodernism, and in short, this book, Postmodern Reading of Contemporary East African Fiction, The Modernist Dream and the Demise of Culture, offers a critical reevaluation of how East African literature engages with the various societal issues, rather than focusing solely on symptoms such as racism and negative ethnicity, patriarchy, and social stratification. I argue that the root causes of these problems often lies in the modernist self. That most critics focus on racism, ethnocentrism. They focus on the themes of war, colonialism, and in this book, I treat this as symptoms of modernism. And so, for us to really address or get a solution to these issues, we need to look at features of modernism and its demerits. That modernism leads to the demise of culture. That's what I suggest in this particular book. And this is based on Nietzsche. Nietzsche talks about a modern self as a very different self, that the conception of the modern state is basically some kind of collective immorality, He looked at them. He says the modern nation state is collective immorality because what an individual may not commit is easily committed behind the mask of the modern nation state. But once they come together and they form a state, they can revenge, they can kill, they can do anything they want uh, behind the mask of the constitution, the law, and the modern nation state. Nietzsche lived in the 1890s, and he was actually among the first critics of modernism. And why are we talking about criticism of modernism? Because postmodernism is modernism trying to understand itself. Postmodernism tries to unearth the excesses of modernism and critique it to make it better. So actually, postmodernism is modernism, but it tries to critique the modernist movement, the modernist movement, and um, and so Nietzsche was one of these critiques of the modernism, and one of the tenets that he criticized so much was the modern nation state. The modern nation state. So when I read his ideas and I also read Heidegger, I discovered, you know, the flip side of modernism, that it can kill culture. It can kill culture. And this is what I applied to East African prose fiction. So I contend that one of the issues that come out in this book is the critique of modernism, and I contend that many literary scholars and writers, while addressing pressing issues, overlook the underlying influence of the modernist tenets. Yeah, that when you write so much about racism, about patriarchy, you are simply addressing the symptoms of modernism. And we should not forget the tenets. If we want to hit the nail on the head, let's just address modernism itself. I know when we talk about modernism, we are not just talking about the layman's usage of the word. Modernism was a movement that arose in Europe during the Age of Reason. It was a break from tradition. And most philosophers now said, we are not interested in tradition, that man or humankind will control its destiny through rationality. And that's why people like René Descartes, they actually argued that God will be brought before the court of justice, and the court of reason, that is, the court of reason, will prove that his beliefs in religion are of no um, are not worthy of attention. So it is a break from tradition and religion, and a belief in rationality. Modernism centralizes culture, and that is why under modernism we have high culture and low culture. So tenets like dualism and or what we call binarism, binarism, are part and parcel of modernism. Yeah? So I contend that we should not just address these symptoms. We need to understand modernism itself. So patent modernist tenets such as bureaucracy, the nation state, systematization, and rationality, or even dualism, are at the heart of most problems like corruption and racism. Like, look at bureaucracy. That because a junior, this is senior junior binary, will not allow a subordinate employee to question a senior, however corrupt they are. That's why we are saying at the heart of corruption in most African countries is the modernist tenet of bureaucracy, where power flows from senior to junior officers in an institution. So instead of just talking about corruption, we need to address tenets of modernism, such as bureaucracy. Yeah. So modernism, in my view, is a complete break with tradition and has led to universalization of culture, overlooking indigenous practices, and so on. So indigenous cultures are therefore overlooked. And some of these indigenous cultures have tenets that can reduce or mitigate corruption in the society. But because indigenous cultures are seen as inferior and Western culture seen as superior, we end up negating cultural practices that can mitigate excesses of corruption in our society. So we see in this book, I see postmodernism as a solution. Yeah. So the book posits that postmodernism provides a comprehensive framework for understanding modernism's effects and, crucially, for mitigating them. Unlike modernism's emphasis on absolute reason and universal truths, postmodernism critiques totality, essentialism, and universality. It encourages an examination of past modes of thought and expression to gain a deeper understanding of history, thereby preventing a cycle of blind repetition. So in this book, I try to argue that because postmodernism questions the grand narrative, for example, the grand narrative, just talk about politics, education, science, and technology, and we negate important issues like sex in marriage, or sex, important issues like gender issues. Yeah, does sex matter? Does gender equality matter? Does environmental conservation matter? Because according to the grand narrative, modernism just believes in grand topics, grand subjects like politics, education, science, and technology, and therefore things like gender inequalities and sex, or even environmental conservation, do not matter. They are negated, they are neglected to the periphery of society. But postmodernism rejects that. It says even the so-called little topics matter a lot. Like our our sex, our gender, they matter a lot. Yeah, the rights of children, the environmental conservation, because actually Mother Nature, personally I believe Mother Nature is more superior to humanity. And so this homocentric ethos, which has been elevated by the modern age, is the major cause of most problems in life today. Most problems in life today, especially environmental issues, gender inequality, and other issues to do with sex and all that. Sex matters a lot. We cannot just say that is a private space. Religion matters. It cannot just be a private space. It cannot just be a private space. Look at what happened in Shakahola in Kenya. We just take religion as a private space, but many people died in the name of fasting to go to heaven just because modernism negates religion. Yeah, religion, and that's why I agree with the reader when he says um, that there is nothing like a fixed center and a fixed periphery. That sometimes the center takes the periphery and the periphery takes to the center. And these are some of the postmodernist thinkers that actually consider in this particular study. Yeah, like the reader, it says there is interdependence between speech and writing. And sometimes to give a good speech, you need you need to do what? You need to write it. And again, for you to be a good writer, you need to be a good speaker. That the two depend on each other. So there is nothing like fixity. There is nothing like fixity. And that's why in this book, there are some chapters where I talk about the teacher-student relationship. The teacher-student relationship, I think based on River Between, and also based on Nurdin Farah's maps. Yeah, Nurdin Farah's maps. Yeah, is a teacher really superior to the student? No, sometimes they swap positions. Sometimes the student becomes superior to the teacher, and other times the teacher becomes superior to the student. So in this book, I use the works of Nietzsche, Heidegger, and the reader, to analyze works of East African prose fiction, to analyze works of East African prose fiction. So this book encourages an examination of past modes of thought and expression to gain deeper understanding of history, thereby preventing a cycle of repetition. I also focus on East African prose fiction, and I've talked about great works like A Grain of Wheat, great works like Farah's Maps, Farah's Close Sesame, Offspring of Paradise by Nadifa Muhammad, not Nadifa Muhammad, but Safi Abdi by Safi Abdi. I focus on Gaël Faye from Rwanda, especially how the modern nation state is a collective immorality, the way Nietzsche says, especially looking at the Rwandan genocide. So I analyze how characters and narratives within this literature reflect the impact of modernist ideals and how postmodern perspectives can offer alternative interpretations. For instance, I examine how the modernist dream leads to universalization of culture in East Africa, often at the expense of pre-existing traditions, and how some literary works challenge this homogenization. So we will come to read the book, and you'll see what I've talked about. So it's not just about the symptoms. Yeah, it's not just about the symptoms. And I use the analogy of a naive physician, yeah, who prescribes painkillers to treat symptoms while the underlying cause of the disease continues to replicate, continues to worsen. Yeah. And so when we just talk about, oh, there is corruption in East Africa, there is ethnocentrism or negative ethnicity in East Africa, there is social stratification, we will just be addressing the symptoms, because modernism has the issue of classes. It talks about high culture and low culture. And it's only postmodernism that can address the excesses of modernism. So when we take a broader approach like postmodernism, we are able to get to the heart of the problem. But when we find scholars, just dismissing postmodernism without giving it a thought, yeah, then we will just continue addressing symptoms like this naive physician. So I challenge scholars to think about postmodernism as a way of mitigating the excesses of modernism. Yeah, because modernism actually is the heart of most of the wars we are having. Like, look at the Rwandan genocide, how indigenous history and culture was neglected. And as they continued, elevating the modernist history, which was actually biased, they ended up with a genocide. Because indigenous history in Rwanda actually was very clear that there was no tribe or ethnic community called Hutu or or Tutsi. These were class identifications that were manipulated by colonists into ethnic communities. And that's why indigenous culture is very important. While modernism considers some cultures low and therefore should be eradicated, postmodernism is against that, because there is nothing superior and nothing inferior for postmodernism. That people can shift the center, can shift to the periphery, and the periphery to the center. And so postmodernism actually allows people to practice their cultures. So I argue that postmodernism can offer insights into the demise of indigenous African cultures amidst the rise of modern nation state. I also observe that a postmodern individual, in some instances, excessively focuses on the self. But basically, I'm talking about the modernist self. The modernist self focuses on itself, and it can lead to very many issues. And so the major theorists in this book are Nietzsche and his criticism of the modern nation state, Heidegger's criticism of bureaucracy. For example, bureaucracy, Heidegger talks about the modern self, which treats human beings as just goods in the warehouses, to be taken here and there. They talk about a human resource. What is human resource? You are commodifying humanity, and Heidegger is against that. And then Fanon's exposition of the nexus between othering and pathology, that when the self is othered, then the psyche will collapse, and most of these end up in psychiatric institutions. And then we have the reader and the issue of arbitrariness of the sign. So in an era where many societies grapple with the legacies of colonialism and ongoing challenges of globalization, this book is exceptionally timely and essential contribution to encourages a much needed intellectual discourse that transcends conventional boundaries, offering a robust framework for understanding the complexities of East African societies through a fresh and critical lens. This book is a must read for literary scholars, cultural critics, and anyone interested in the intricate interplay between philosophy, literature, and societal development in East Africa. So thank you so much, and I encourage you to subscribe to my channel and also buy my book. Please order for this book, read it, so that we promote local writers. Thank you so much. Thank you.